What happens when science fiction tries too hard, flies too high, and then falls straight out of theaters before anyone can blink? Some films are forgotten because they were small, others because they were strange, but a few were pulled because audiences reacted so fast and so loudly that theaters stepped back almost instantly. And when the lights went down during these screenings, something unexpected happened. Let's look at the movies that could not survive their own debut. Number 15, Zardoz, 1974. Zardoz begins with one of the boldest images of the entire decade, and not in the way the studio hoped. Watching Sean Connery stride across a post-future wasteland in bright red clothing made audiences in 1974 stop, stare, and sometimes leave. The film tries to blend high-concept philosophy with surreal visuals, floating stone heads, confusing dialogue, long, quiet scenes that feel like they belong in a different movie. Director John Boorman imagined an epic about society, memory, and immortality, but by the time it reached theaters, even critics struggled to explain what they had just watched. During early screenings in some cities, people left before the 20-minute mark. A few theaters pulled it after day one because walkouts were so heavy that the auditoriums were nearly empty by the final act. The famous promotional art promised something intense and futuristic, but the movie delivered a dreamy, slow puzzle that most viewers were not prepared for. Yet Zardoz later found new life as a cult favorite. Some say it is fascinating once you know what to expect, but at the time, the mix of bold costume choices and strange world-building proved too much for audiences, turning a highly ambitious vision into a theatrical retreat. Number 14, The Giant Spider Invasion, 1975. This one tried to be the big creature event of the mid-70s, but ended up as a lesson in how practical effects can break a film completely. The Giant Spider Invasion was proudly handmade, but the main spider was literally built on top of a Volkswagen car, complete with giant furry legs that wobbled whenever it moved. Audiences noticed right away. Some were amused, others disappointed, and many theaters faced immediate complaints. The plot follows a small town under attack by creatures that arrive after a mysterious meteor crash. Sounds exciting, but the execution made people laugh at moments meant to be serious. Critics compared it to a school play with a large budget. In several regions, showings were cut short because viewers walked out faster than ushers could clean the aisles. Theater owners realized people were buying tickets mostly to make fun of it, not to enjoy it, and some simply removed it from their schedules after a single weekend. Despite all this, the movie never disappeared completely. People still watch it today for its charm and unintentional humor, but in 1975, expectations were higher, and the visual effects were too distracting to let the story breathe. The theater pullbacks showed how quickly word of mouth can reshape a movie's entire fate. Number 13, Exorcist II: The Heretic, 1977. When a sequel arrives for one of the biggest films of the decade, expectations are enormous. Exorcist II: The Heretic tried to follow a masterpiece with a mix of science fiction concepts, dream imagery, and hypnotic machines. Instead of fear and tension, audiences received long scenes of futuristic science mixed with spiritual exploration. People came expecting intensity. What they got was confusion. The first public screenings are famous for what happened inside the theaters. Before the halfway point, people started leaving, others shouted at the screen, some demanded refunds. Warner Brothers executives sat in on early showings and realized the reactions were overwhelmingly negative. By the next morning, prints were physically pulled from multiple theaters so the studio could re-edit and shorten the film in an attempt to salvage it. Even after adjustments, the film never fully recovered. Critics called it bewildering, and fans of the original were completely thrown off by its shift toward speculative science and futuristic elements. Today, some viewers find it interesting in a strange, experimental way, but at the time, the reaction was so strong that it became one of the rare major studio sequels to be withdrawn mid-run. The lesson was clear: ambition can be admirable, but it still has to meet the audience somewhere they recognize. Number 12. At the Earth's Core, 1976. At the Earth's Core promised adventure. What it delivered was a colorful but clunky journey into underground civilizations brought to life with costumes and creatures that looked dramatically older than the decade itself. The movie follows explorers who drill into the Earth and discover a hidden world ruled by giant beings. The idea is exciting, but the execution felt dated even on release day. Many theaters reported low turnout from the start. Critics pointed out that the effects looked closer to early 60s television than mid-70s cinema. In some cities, the film was replaced early with other amicus productions that were performing better. Audiences wanted smooth action and impressive visuals, but instead they watched actors fighting rubber creatures under purple lighting. The pacing also became an issue. Dialogue scenes stretched on while action sequences felt staged and repetitive. Because of this combination, several theaters decided to remove it from rotation within a week. Not out of controversy, but because empty seats do not pay the bills. The studio hoped it would ride the wave of fantasy and adventure films, but instead it struggled to hold attention. Years later, it gained a nostalgic following, especially among viewers who enjoy retro creature designs. But back in 1976, it never found the momentum it needed to remain on screen. Number 11, Empire of the Ants, 1977. Based loosely on an H.G. Wells idea, Empire of the Ants took a simple setup and turned it into a battle against giant insects, created through special effects that were far less convincing than promised. In the advertising, the ants looked huge and frightening. In the movie, they looked like regular ants photographed close up and pasted into scenes. The disconnect was immediate. The story follows a group of people stranded on an island where the ants have been changed by strange chemicals. The idea had potential, but viewers complained that the creatures did not match the posters. Reports began circulating of audiences laughing during scenes meant to be tense. Drive-in theaters saw people honking their car horns during dramatic moments because the effects were so obviously mismatched. Several theater managers pulled the movie early because patrons thought the marketing was misleading. Complaints reached the studio quickly, and some regions stopped screenings altogether to avoid further negative word of mouth. Even critics who enjoyed campy cinema were disappointed by the gap between concept and execution. Over time, the film became a curious relic of the decade. Some enjoy it for its boldness and unintended humor, but in 1977, it was seen as an overpromised creature feature that could not meet the expectations its own posters created. Number 10, Laser Blast, 1978. Laser Blast is the definition of a movie that wanted to be a grand sci-fi adventure, but ended up feeling like a late-night television experiment that escaped by accident. It follows a lonely teenager who finds a strange alien device that slowly alters his behavior. On paper, that sounds like a solid setup, but in practice, the film moves between desert scenes, wandering plot points, and effects that look more like light bulbs taped to props than futuristic energy beams. When it premiered, audiences were confused by how uneven the film felt. Some scenes looked unfinished. Others seemed to stretch out with no real direction. The alien creatures, while imaginative, appeared in brief, oddly edited sequences that made viewers wonder if key parts of the story had been lost. Reports spread quickly that the film felt rushed, and the word of mouth was so rough that several theaters decided to end screenings early. A few cities pulled it before the second weekend because attendance was extremely low. Yet Laser Blast became a cult favorite years later, mostly because of its earnest effort and unintentional humor. But in 1978, it struggled to compete with bigger, cleaner sci-fi productions that were raising audience expectations. Theater owners realized quickly that the crowds were not coming back, and the movie faded from screens almost as fast as it arrived. Number 9, Star Crash, 1978. Star Crash arrived during the wave of sci-fi excitement. Inspired by major blockbusters, but it had its own unique personality. Colorful costumes, glowing swords, and a mix of stop-motion creatures gave it a distinct feel. Unfortunately, many viewers found the pacing strange, the dialogue stiff, and the visual effects too uneven to hold their attention. The story follows space adventurers racing across galaxies to stop a villain's powerful machine. It sounds epic, but audiences quickly noticed that the sets looked flimsy, and the editing felt rushed. In preview screenings, people laughed at moments that were supposed to be dramatic, and several theater owners reported that families were leaving halfway through the film. When a movie is meant to feel grand, but instead feels like a patchwork of wild ideas, reactions tend to be strong. Word spread that Star Crash was visually bold but not polished enough to meet theater standards of the time. Because of this, some U.S. theaters canceled planned showings while others pulled it shortly after opening week. It did, however, build a loyal fan base over the decades. Today, many enjoy it for its imaginative style and fearless creativity. But in 1978, it simply could not convince enough people to stay in their seats. Number 8. Invasion of the Bee-Girls, 1973. Invasion of the Bee-Girls tried to merge science fiction with mystery, creating a story about a strange transformation affecting people in a quiet town. The idea of scientists experimenting with insects to create a new kind of human hybrid should have been thrilling, but the movie's tone shifted so much between drama, suspense, and camp that viewers were unsure how to react. In some cities, local groups complained that the film's themes felt too intense for general audiences. The reaction was quick. Several theaters quietly pulled it from their programs, especially in conservative regions, where unusual sci-fi concepts often faced pushback. Even without direct controversy, the film struggled to hold attention because the pacing moved between slow exposition and sudden bursts of odd behavior that left many confused. Some critics noted that the production felt uneven, as if it wanted to be serious but kept slipping into something more playful without meaning to. Despite being pulled in several areas, the movie later found a new audience among fans of quirky 70s science fiction. People enjoy it today for its strange charm and bold imagination. But in 1973, the mixed tone and unpredictable reactions led to early withdrawal from many theaters. Number 7. The Visitor, 1979. The Visitor is one of the most unusual sci-fi films of the decade. It blends cosmic forces, mysterious children, and silent figures appearing out of nowhere. The story feels both futuristic and mystical, and the result is a movie that leaves viewers feeling like they watched something from another dimension. While that can be appealing today, audiences in 1979 were not ready for such a surreal mix. The film jumps between scenes involving bright lights, strange powers, and cryptic dialogue that never fully explains itself. Critics described it as one part sci-fi drama and one part dream sequence. Because of this, many early screenings ended with confused audiences, and box office numbers dropped immediately. In some areas, distributors pulled the film within days because the turnout was too low to justify keeping it on the schedule. Despite its initial failure, The Visitor eventually gained recognition for its uniqueness. Some viewers now admire how confidently it embraces its unusual style. But at the time, theaters preferred movies that offered a smoother, clearer narrative. The Visitor was simply too strange, too bold, and too unpredictable for general audiences, leaving it without the steady ticket sales needed to stay on screens. Number 6. The Shape of Things to Come, 1979. Inspired loosely by an H.G. Wells story, The Shape of Things to Come promised sweeping futuristic cities, cosmic adventure, and powerful new ideas. Instead, audiences saw sets that looked unfinished, costumes that felt borrowed, and storylines that drifted from one location to another without much urgency. People expecting a large-scale science fiction epic were surprised by how small the film actually felt. The plot involves a future society trying to rebuild after a major disaster, but the execution fell short of expectations. Scenes meant to showcase advanced technology looked more like television props, and the pacing left viewers waiting for something grand to happen. Many theaters reported very low attendance from the opening day onward. In some Canadian cities, the movie was pulled immediately because several showings had almost no audience at all. This quick withdrawal reflected how competitive the sci-fi landscape had become by the late 70s. People wanted strong visuals, powerful stories, and clear world building. The Shape of Things to Come struggled to deliver any of these consistently. Though it has gained a small following for its retro charm, its theatrical run ended faster than most films of its era because audiences simply were not connecting with what they saw on the screen. Number 5, Message from Space, 1978. Message from Space was Japan's bold attempt to join the late 70s sci-fi boom, but the results were so uneven that many U.S. theaters removed it from their schedules almost immediately. The film follows a group of young people who receive glowing seeds that send them on an intergalactic mission. It sounds adventurous, but the execution bounced between exciting, confusing, and unintentionally funny. Viewers expecting a polished outer space epic instead found glowing prop seeds, colorful but chaotic action, and a plot that shifted gears with little warning. The movie was released in the United States not long after audiences had embraced more refined sci-fi experiences, and that comparison hurt it. Critics said the film moved too quickly for viewers to become invested, and its strange pacing made it feel more like a collection of scenes than a complete story. When reactions dipped, several American theaters pulled it after only 2 weeks. Attendance was low, and the movie struggled to connect with a wide audience. Over the years, Message from Space developed a cult following among fans of unusual sci-fi, particularly for its creativity and bright visuals. But in 1978, the theatrical run was cut short because audiences simply did not know how to process its energetic, unpredictable style. Number 4, The Ultimate Warrior, 1975. The Ultimate Warrior imagined a grim future where New York City had turned into a near-silent wasteland filled with isolated groups struggling to survive. Starring Yul Brynner, the movie aimed for gritty atmosphere and thoughtful world building, but the final product felt too slow and too quiet for mainstream sci-fi audiences. The story follows a small settlement trying to protect its people while searching for a better future. Much of the film is spent exploring the bleak ruins of the city with long stretches of stillness. Some viewers appreciated the mood, but others felt the pacing dragged. Reports surfaced of theaters experiencing walkouts during the slow first half, with audiences expecting more intensity and faster movement. Box office numbers were low from day one, and some regions removed it after only a few days to make room for titles that were performing better. The film struggled because it was caught between two styles. It wanted to be thoughtful, but viewers were expecting something more energetic. Decades later, some sci-fi fans respect The Ultimate Warrior for its early attempt at realistic future storytelling. But back in 1975, most theaters quickly decided it could not hold enough attention to justify a long run. Number 3, The Bubble, 1976. The Bubble began as a mid-60s three-dimensional experiment. But by the time it returned to theaters in 1976, the charm of its effects had faded. The film follows a couple who crash land in a bizarre town, sealed under a massive, invisible dome. Strange behavior, odd architecture, a constant sense of mystery. These ideas should have sparked excitement, but the re-release faced a big problem. The three-dimensional visuals caused discomfort for many viewers. Reports came from multiple theaters describing headaches, dizziness, and audiences removing their glasses mid-scene because the images were too difficult to watch. In an era when moviegoers wanted smooth visuals and clear effects, the Bubble's older technology felt out of place. Managers in some cities decided to pull the film entirely after receiving complaints. The pacing also felt outdated to viewers who had discovered faster-moving sci-fi by the mid-70s. Long stretches of wandering through the dome town confused people who expected a clear plot. Despite this, the film has a curious legacy for being one of the rare three-dimensional features to be withdrawn due to discomfort rather than controversy. It remains an interesting relic, but its 1976 run ended as quickly as it began. Number 2, Death Sport, 1978. Death Sport tried to capture the energy of dystopian action stories, but ended up feeling more chaotic than thrilling. Set in a future where society has fallen apart, it follows warriors traveling across barren landscapes on bright, futuristic bikes. The concept had potential, but the movie struggled with rough editing, uneven performances, and scenes that felt rushed. Audiences expected sharp, fast-paced action, but instead they received long pauses, unclear motivations, and chase scenes that repeated without building tension. Some theatergoers reported confusion about the plot, which made it difficult to stay invested. As word spread, attendance dropped sharply. In several regions, the film was pulled mid-run because theaters saw very little foot traffic after the first weekend. The production had well-known cast members, but even that was not enough to save it. Over the years, some viewers found entertainment in its raw, unpolished charm, but in 1978, it stood out for all the wrong reasons. Theater owners learned quickly that the movie did not have the momentum needed to sustain interest, and many replaced it with stronger performing titles almost immediately. Number 1, The Humanoid, 1979. The Humanoid tried to ride the growing wave of sci-fi excitement that filled the late 70s, but the result was so uneven that many theaters removed it before most audiences even knew it existed. Starring Richard Kiel as a gentle giant turned into a powerful robotic force, the film offered bright costumes, glowing sets, and big space battles. On posters, it looked grand. On the screen, it felt strangely unfinished. The story involves a peaceful man transformed against his will by a dangerous energy formula, sending him on a chaotic path across a distant world. The concept could have worked, but the pacing moved unpredictably, the dialogue felt stiff, and the special effects looked far older than the year they were released. Early viewers whispered and chuckled during dramatic scenes, while others simply walked out because the tone shifted so quickly from serious to unintentionally humorous. Reports spread that the film was struggling badly. In several European regions, theaters pulled it after the opening weekend because attendance was extremely low. Distributors trimmed showings and replaced them with more stable titles. Even science fiction magazines of the time remarked on how quickly the movie disappeared from screens. Yet, The Humanoid eventually found a small following among fans who enjoy unusual retro futurism. Today, some viewers appreciate it as a colorful time capsule. But in 1979, its brief theatrical run ended almost as soon as it began, proving that ambition alone is not enough to hold an audience. When you look back at these forgotten sci-fi experiments, you realize something important. Not every movie fades because it was small. Some collapsed because audiences reacted faster than studios expected. These films were bold, messy, strange, and sometimes far ahead of their time, even if viewers didn't see it then. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts below, share the video, and subscribe for more forgotten stories waiting to be rediscovered.